So we shall be starting from text 16 onwards. The text 16 is Vichakshanosyarhi veditum vibhur anantaparasya nivritti sukham pravartmanasya gunair anatmanas tato bhavan darshaya cheshchitam vibho. The Supreme Lord, the Supreme Lord is unlimited. Only a very expert personality retired from the activities of material happiness deserves to understand this knowledge of spiritual values. Therefore, those who are not so well situated due to material attachment should be shown the ways of transcendental realizations by your goodness through descriptions of the transcendental activities of the Supreme Lord. Okay, so theology is actually a very difficult subject matter. In fact, people who are not conversant with the science of the self, they cannot understand the existence of the Supreme Self. And in fact, to even understand the existence of the self or the soul is also not such an easy subject matter. One time Srila Prabhupada was talking to some Indian gentleman, many times rich Indian people, they would go to meet Srila Prabhupada. So one time, one Indian gentleman was talking to Srila Prabhupada and he said, Swamiji, it is so difficult to understand the subject matter of the soul. And Prabhupada said, yes, animals cannot understand. And Prabhupada further added that modern society is more or less animalistic. But I'm trying to explain them this subject matter. So, animalistic society means people where they are simply interested in the animalistic propensities. That is, eating, sleeping, sex, and defense. So, civilization which is interested only in the animalistic needs of the body, they cannot understand the science of the self. They cannot understand this theology. The God's existence, the nature of God, and the nature of this material existence, it's difficult for them to understand. Even if they hear, it's very difficult to understand for them. And Srimad Bhagavatam is actually the topmost theological science. And therefore, it requires, highly accomplished and exalted personalities to understand the subject matter. So Vyasadeva was actually advising Narada Muni to describe the science of God directly by relating his transcendental activities. In other words, describing the pastimes of the Lord. Because through the pastimes of the Lord, simply hearing those pastimes, one can actually very easily transcend the three modes of material nature and can easily understand the subject matter, as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Janma Karma Cha Me Divyam. My birth and activities are all Divya. And simply by understanding those subject matter, one can go back home, back to Godhead. So simply by hearing the pastimes of the Lord, one can actually understand the truth about the Supreme Lord. It's actually the Vedanta Sutra or the Upanishads, they describe about the Supreme Lord in a very philosophical way. And many times, people would be utterly confused in order to, understand, the subject matter of the soul, subject matter of God, they can be completely confused. Like I remember very famous purport of Srila Prabhupada on Ishopanishad. So if you simply read that purport, actually I think I'll open and probably we can read one paragraph from that one purport from Ishopanishad. Yeah. So this is the invocation mantra. Prabhupada says, the complete whole or the supreme absolute truth is the complete personality of Godhead. A realization of impersonal Brahman or of Paramatma, the super soul, is incomplete realization of the absolute complete. The supreme personality of Godhead is Satchit Ananda Vigraha. Realization of impersonal Brahman is realization of his Sat feature or the aspect of eternity. And Paramatma realization of his Sat and Chit feature, his aspects of eternity and knowledge. But realization of personality of Godhead is the realization of all transcendental features, namely Satchit Ananda, bliss. When one realizes Supreme Person, he realizes these aspects of the Supreme Absolute Truth in their completeness. So, you see, the language is so philosophical, and especially the most the intricate is this particular line of Prabhupada's work. It says, complete whole, the personality of God has immense potencies of all which are as complete as he. Thus, this phenomenal world is also complete in itself. So, this complete purport is actually describing the completeness of the Supreme Absolute Truth and all the emanations that are coming from him, how complete they are. So, anyone who reads this just one purport, if he doesn't have philosophical sense, he'll be completely confused. So, Upanishads and Vedanta Sutra, they describe the Supreme Lord in a very intricate philosophical way. But when we hear the passings of the Lord, like Srimad Bhagavatam describes, it becomes much more easier for us to understand the subject matter. So therefore, Vyasadeva is being advised by Srila Narad Muni to describe the nature of the absolute truth by describing his wonderful activities and pastimes. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his followers, they actually exhibited the expertise in this connection. So if you see Goswami's literature, that is, so sublime. The books compiled by the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan, they are not only philosophically, but in a very wonderful way describing the nature of the Supreme Lord. Especially if we take Sanatana Goswami's Brihad Bhagavatamrita, Rupa Goswami's Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, they're full of such wonderful attributes of the Lord. The complete science of the absolute truth has been explained. People who may not have much philosophical sense, if they simply read Brihad Bhagavatamrita, they can actually understand the nature of the absolute truth. The ultimate, understanding about the Supreme Absolute Truth and his nature can be understood simply in that wonderful pastime format as described by Sanatana Goswami. We go to text 17. Tektva swadharmam charanam bhujam harir bhajan apakota patittato yadhi yatruka bhadram abhud amushyakim ko vardhapto bhajatam swadharmatam. One who has forsaken his material occupation to engage in the devotional service of the Lord may sometimes fall down while in an immature stage, yet there's no danger of his being unsuccessful. On the other hand, a non-devotee, though fully engaged in occupational duties, does not gain anything. So this is actually one of the very famous verses from the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. So this particular verse is describing the glories of engaging in devotional service. Tyaktva swadharmam charanam bhujam hari. So swadharma means, in this case, one's prescribed duties. Like the society is divided into 4 varnas and 4 ashramas. So Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra. And then each category, there can be Brahmachari, Grihastha, Vanaprastha and Sannyasi. So in this way, there can be, the different duties for each varna and ashrama, as Krishna explains in Bhagavad Gita. For example, for Brahmanas, the prescribed duty is Pathan Pathan Yajan Yajat Dana Parigraha. These are the prescribed duties of the Brahmanas. Pathan, Pathan. Pathan means to study the scriptures. Pathan means to make others study the scriptures, teach others the scriptures. Pathan, Pathan. Yajan, Yajan. Yajan means to perform the yajna or worship of the Supreme Lord. And Yajan, inspire others to do the same thing, to worship the Supreme Lord. And Dana Parigraha, to give charity and to accept charity. These are the prescribed duties of Brahmanas. Similarly, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, Shudra, they have their prescribed duties. Similarly, Brahmachari, Grihastha, Vanaprastha, Sannyasis, everybody have their prescribed duties. So, if somebody gives up those duties, Tattva Swadharmam, a person gives up his prescribed duty for what? Charanam Bhujam Hari, to worship the Supreme Lord, to worship the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord. No? Then such a person is bhajan apakko, and in spite of his bhajan not being pakko, pakko means firm or mature, and apakwa means immature, unripened. Like you say, fruit also in the tree is pakwa or anapakwa. So ripened or unripened, bhajan. Bhajan or his bhakti or devotion to the Supreme Lord is apakwa, is immature. And athapatit tatoid, and therefore he falls down. Patit means to become fallen. So a person who gives up his prescribed duties to engage in the service of the Supreme Lord's lotus feet, and for some reason, because his bhajan is not mature and he falls down from that practice, yatraka abhadram. Still, what is abhadra? Kwa abhadra? There is what kind of inauspiciousness in that? That means he's asking a question. What are the laws for such a person? There is no laws, or there is no inauspiciousness for such a person. And on the other hand, ko artha apto bhajatam swadharmata. What is the gain for a person who is performing his swadharma, his prescribed duties very nicely, but does not worship the Supreme Lord? So in simple words, the person who's performing his prescribed duty is being condemned here if he's not worshipping the Supreme Lord. On the other hand, a person who is engaged in the worship of the Supreme Lord, engaged in devotional service of the Supreme Lord, there is no loss or diminution for such a person. So it is enjoined in the scripture that one can relinquish all his duties and surrender to the Supreme Lord. Sripad Madhvacharya, he wanted to take sannyas at the age of 7. So he went to take sannyas to his guru, and his guru said, I cannot give you sannyas unless you have permission of your father. So Madhvacharya went to his father and he said, please give me permission that I can take sannyas. His father said, no, I cannot give you permission. So his father refused to give him permission. And the Madhvacharya said, no, I want to go, otherwise, I will drown myself. The father fell at his feet. He said, please, I'm begging you, my dear son, don't take sannyas. So Madhvacharya said, you see, in the scripture it is said that a father can touch the feet of the son only when the son becomes sannyasi. So you're touching my feet, that means you already accepted me as a sannyasi. So please let me take sannyas. But his father still did not agree. So Madhvacharya went to take bath in the lake, and a crocodile came and caught hold of his leg. So his father was trying to protect him and pull him out, but crocodile was not leaving him. So Madhvacharya said, my dear father, looks like I'm going to die now. The crocodile is not going to leave me. At least now give me your permission to take sannyas. Let me die as a sannyasi. I don't want to die as, ordinary, person in the household life, or dying as, any ordinary person. So I want to die as a sannyasi. Please give me permission. So father, with great sorrow in the heart, he said, okay, you can take sannyas. When he said that, the crocodile disappeared. And Madhvacharya actually went and took sannyas. So it is enjoined in the scripture that one can relinquish all the duties. Madhvacharya, his duty was to be obedient to the father. But he wanted to engage in the missionary activities of, defeating the philosophy of Mayavad and establishing the true Siddhanta from the scriptures. So in order to engage in the service of the Supreme Lord, Madhvacharya, he took sannyas. Similarly, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also, he took sannyas at the age of 24 when his mother was, widow, and his wife, she was hardly 16 years old. She was a young girl without any child. And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took sannyas, leaving his wife, beautiful young wife, and his widow mother alone. So, but still, for the sake of serving the Supreme Lord, one can relinquish his so-called prescribed duties of this world. So, somebody who may surrender unto the Supreme Lord may give up his worldly duties, and yet, because of his worldly mindedness, one may become trapped by the illusory energy of the Lord. But yet, there is no loss for such a person. We have the example of Bharat Maharaj. Bharat Maharaj was also, he left his home. He left his kingdom. He was actually a king. Very successful emperor of the whole world, not just an ordinary king. He was practically the king of the whole planet. He had many wives. He had many obedient children. He had flourishing kingdom. All the ministers and commanders, they were all under his control. Subjects loved him very much. So he had no scarcity. He was actually an emperor, a very successful emperor. But he left all of that to engage in devotional service of the Lord. So he retired to the forest. And in the forest, he became attached to a deer. He became attached to a deer, and so much so that he drifted away from his devotional service in the forest. He forgot the very purpose why he had left his kingdom, his family, and even his own children he had left. And he became attached to a child of a deer. And yet, because of his attachment to the deer, at the time of death, he could only think of deer. And next life, he ended up being deer. But because he had performed devotional service by the mercy of the Lord, he could remember who he was in his previous life. As a deer, he could remember that he was a king in the previous life. So he became alarmed that I was so foolish. As a king, I retired. I gave up my wife, my children, my kingdom, and everything, and went to forest to do devotional service. And I became attached to a deer. And therefore, I have become a deer now myself. So therefore, he became cautious. And when he gave up his body as a deer, he again was born in the family of a Brahmana. But even in this lifetime, as a Brahmana's son, he was named as Bharat, but he was still able to remember his two past lives as Maharaj Bharat and also as a deer. And of course, because of that remembrance, he became extremely cautious and perfected his life by detaching himself from everything. But the point is, even though Bharat Maharaj drifted away from devotional service and became a deer, yet there was no loss for him. Eventually, in just 2 more lifetimes, he perfected his life. Similarly, Chitraketu Maharaj, he was cursed by Mother Parvati to become a demon. So apparently, demon is a very inauspicious species of life. So Chitraketu Maharaj became the demon Vritasura. And even as a demon Vritasura, he perfected his life. So even if there's a chance of falling down, in this particular verse, the stress is given that one should surrender unto the lotus feet of the Lord. Because that surrender is the greatest achievement in the life of a person. That surrender will eventually make a person completely perfected in devotional life. Like Krishna also says in Bhagavad Gita, Salpam apiyasya dharma sitrayate mahato bhaya. Even a very tiny progress in Krishna consciousness can deliver a person from the greatest fear in this world. We have instance of Ajamil as well. Ajamil, for example, in the early life, he was a devotee. It is described that he was actually a very good young boy, very respectful to his parents. He worshipped the Supreme Lord, but somehow that he became attracted to a prostitute and fell down. But still, he was saved by the Lord at the end. So this is actually the wonderful lesson we learn. This verse is actually emphasizing that if one engages in devotional service for any reason, will eventually be promoted to, attain the supreme perfection of life. Sooner or later, the person is bound to become perfect and go back home, back to Godhead. So anyone who has started his journey on the path of Krishna consciousness, Krishna takes personally responsibility of the person to be leading to the complete perfection. Text 18. Tasyaiva heto prayate kovido na labhyate dharmadam upayadham tallabhyate dukkavad anantya sukham kalena sarvatra gabhiram hasam. Persons who are actually intelligent and philosophically inclined should endeavor only for that purposeful end, which is not obtainable even by wandering from topmost planet Brahmaloka down to the lowest planet Patala. As far as the happiness derived from sense enjoyment is concerned, It can be obtained automatically in course of time. Just as in course of time we obtain miseries, even though we do not desire them. So this is actually a very wonderful lesson from Srimad Bhagavatam. Kovida means intelligent person or a learned person. Tasaiva heto prayateta kovida. Kovida or learned people, they prayata is like prayatna. In Hindi, the word prayatna is there. So prayate means they put endeavor. Intelligent people, they endeavor for what? Na labhyate yat brahmatam upari adha. Something that is not to be found by brahmatam. Brahmatam means wandering. Upari adha, the upper planetary system, upari, and adha means lower planetary systems. So intelligent people struggle or try to work for something that is not to be found in upper as well as lower planetary system. What is that? As far as the eating, sleeping, sex, defense is concerned, the material opulences are concerned, they are found everywhere. Upper planetary system, lower planetary system, even in this earthly planetary system, everywhere those are found. And therefore, an intelligent person doesn't struggle for that. Now, tallabhyate dukkhavat ananta sukham kalena sarvatra gabhira namasa. It says because sukha is found in due course of time. Labhyate means one attains or finds, sukham. Just like one finds dukkha. Nobody works in this world to attain dukkha. Like I may have healthy body. I don't work very hard to become diseased. Diseases come on their own. Today I'm all right. Tomorrow, I have flu or I have influenza or whatever. We don't even realize when the diseases develop in the body. So nobody works for getting disease. Nobody works for becoming distressed or unhappy. But it comes. Similarly, sukha also comes. Whether we try or not, it automatically comes in due course of time. Kalena sarvatra, in due course of time. In due course of time, one attains happiness, one attains distress. Therefore, intelligent people do not work for that happiness and distress. They work for something that is not to be found anywhere in this world. So, in this world, everybody is very eager to attain the greatest amount of sense enjoyment. I should have best foodstuffs to eat. I should have best home to live in. I should have best cars to ride in. I should have best bank balance. I should have best, spouse or mate, or maybe many, many mates to enjoy the sex life. So I should have best insurance policies to protect myself. So in this way, a person thinks to have best of everything in this world. So people who are atheistic, they try only for this lifetime. People who are believers in the next life, they struggle not only for this lifetime, but they struggle for next life also. Next life also, I should have something better. But by the laws of nature and by the laws of the Supreme, people in different planetary systems, in different lokas, they attain their so-called happiness and distress based on their karma, simply in due course of time. So miseries and mixed happiness, these are the two features of material life. Happiness never comes unadulterated in this world. And of course, misery is, you know, therefore Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Dukkhalaya Mashashva, Napnuvanti Mahatmana. Mahatma he is not interested in remaining in this world, which is Dukkhalaya. Alaya is a home of Dukkha. So no one is free from the miseries of life, especially birth, death, old age, disease. And similarly, everyone has destined to attain some happiness. No one remains unhappy throughout the life. And no one remains happy throughout the life. Happiness comes, distress also comes. And just as distress comes, happiness also comes. And no one gets more or less of these happiness and distress simply because of endeavor. Like some people think, okay, if you are more educated, then you can earn more. And they may give example, oh, see, look at this person. He's so highly educated and he earns so much. But that equation doesn't work in that way. I remember one of the friend of mine, devotee friends, used to live in Vrindavan. He had double PhDs, and yet he was struggling. He was struggling to simply pay off his bills. And he didn't have many bills. He was living in New Vrindavan. He had done 2 PhDs. When he moved to Pittsburgh, and there also, he took up a job in university, and yet he was not paid sufficient, simply paying the rent and barely getting the food for the family. That's all he could do, in spite of having 2 PhDs. So, the material sense enjoyment and material distress. Here in this verse it says, Kalena sarvatra gabhira namasa. In due course of time, everyone gets it. Their allocated quota of happiness and distress, everyone gets in due course of time. Text 90. Navai jano jatu kathan chana brajen mukunda sevi anvayad anga samsritim smaran mukundangri upagohanam punar ivatum ichen rasagraho jana. My dear Vyas, even though a devotee of Lord Krishna sometimes fall down somehow or other, he certainly does not undergo material existence like others, like the fruitive workers. Because a person who has once relished the taste of lotus feet of the Lord can do nothing but remember that ecstasy again and again. Mukunda Sevi Anvayad Anga Samsriti. A person who has, Mukunda Sevi, if he has served the Mukunda, he cannot help but Anga Samsriti. He will remember again and again the joy that he has derived by serving the Lord Mukunda. So, even though a devotee falls down, a devotee is never to be considered same like an ordinary fallen karmi. A person who is interested in sense enjoyment. A karmi, or a person who is not in devotional service, he suffers, or he or she suffers, the results of fruitive activities, their own fruitive activities. But in the case of devotees, devotee is reformed by the punishment of the Supreme Lord. A neophyte devotee foolishly thinks accumulating some material power in exchange of devotional service. No. For such devotees are sometimes put into difficulty by the Lord. Like Yudhishthira Maharaj asked this question to Krishna in Srimad Bhagavatam. And my dear Krishna, why is it that sometimes your devotees are seen to be suffering a lot, whereas devotees of Lord Shiva, they seem to be enjoying the life. Whereas Lord Shiva himself doesn't enjoy. He doesn't even build a home. He lives under a tree. And Krishna, you live in palaces. You have 16,000 queens. So it looks like contradictory that your devotees, they suffer. They are in poverty. Like Pandavas, they had to go through so much. They were always in trouble. They were always in distress. They were deprived of all their wealth and their kingdom and go to the exile for 13 years. So, Yudhishthira Maharaj asked this question, my dear Krishna, why is like that? Krishna told to Arjuna, to Yudhishthira Maharaj, Yasyaham anugrahami harishetadhamsha. A person whom I become especially favorable, I take away all that person's riches. Now, so devotees sometimes are put in the trouble by the Lord. They don't suffer because of their karma. So this is the sum and substance of this was that a devotee never suffers exactly the same way as a non-devotee suffers. Devotee sometime apparently suffering is under the personal care of the Supreme Lord. Prabhupada gives example like a rat in the mouth of a cat. He's in trouble. And kitten in the mouth of the cat. Looks like he's in the same trouble. But he's not in trouble. He's in the loving care of the mother. So I think we will stop here. A devotee, because he has, continued, he had performed devotional service, he does not suffer like the ordinary karmis. He goes on relishing the joy that he has experienced by performing devotional service.